So, bombing these places isn't going to stop anything. It's not going to improve anything. It may turn out to rally all of Latin America against us.
There was always this expectation that someone would explain why we're doing this. You didn't want to go into a conflict because, of course, you never really know what's going to happen without getting the public on board.
Don't execute the drug peddler or the child trafficker, but let's bomb Venezuela. Doesn't make any damn sense whatsoever.
Tucker Carlson and Douglas Macgregor just exposed the idiocy of U.S. regime change operations in Venezuela, and in this clip, they discuss what motivations are driving this push right now in Washington, what propaganda is being used to support it, and why, like all disastrous regime change operations, this would have dire consequences for the United States. So let's get right into it. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Colonel Douglas Macgregor commanded the last tank battle that the U.S. Army participated in during the first Iraq War, a graduate of West Point and a frequent guest, joins us now to assess the likelihood of a regime change war against Maduro. Doug, thanks so much for coming on. Are we doing this?
It looks bad. In fact, it looks like it could happen on 4 or 5 November. The reason I bring that up, it just so happens to be a full moon, which would lend credence to the argument that lunatics are ruling us in Washington, D.C. You've gone down the list of reasons, and there are a couple that I would add, because I recently went into D.C. and I talked to some people. Some of the people I talked to are just below the decision-maker level. And these are the usual smug resume builders who come in and out through every administration, hoping that at some point they'll get a high-level appointment. And they said a couple of things that I thought were interesting. First, they said, well, you got to understand, Doug, we're flipping the chessboard on Russia and China. I said, what? Oh, yes, don't you understand? By going into Venezuela, we're saying a very strong message because Russia and China have tried to build up and cultivate support there, and we're telling them that they can't do it. We're flipping the chessboard.
Hasn't been hard for them to do that, by the way, with Brazil being a founding member of BRICS and Venezuela pressing for membership within BRICS. It's hard to say that the U.S. has tried to do anything to stop that propensity, especially as it gets into proxy wars against major BRICS powers, has that, bombing campaign against Iran, the new war with Iran this summer, another ally of BRICS, helped consummate regime change in Syria, another BRICS country. It's not like the U.S. has done anything to drive wedges between BRICS countries. They've pushed them closer together.
Well, I don't think the Russians are prepared to fight for Venezuela. In fact, I know that Putin has given very explicit instructions to the Venezuelans. You're on your own. We'll give you equipment and assistance if we can, but forget it. We're not going to fight for you. The Chinese certainly aren't going to send the Chinese Navy to the Caribbean to stand off and fight us. That's not going to happen.
Chinese have, 2 aircraft carriers that are operable right now? Maybe 3? It's just absurd. It's not going to happen.
And I said that. I said, so, you can't make this argument that this has some great strategic value that justifies this enormous task force. And, it ultimately boiled down to it's time for us to be strong again. As though bombing hapless people in Venezuela or Colombia or Nicaragua or anywhere in Latin America is testimony to our greatness as a nation. And then, of course, the final straw is, well, we've got to destroy the drug problem where it originates. Well, I've got a big flash of the obvious. The drug problem originates here inside the United States. You're not going to get anywhere by bombing Mexico just because Mexico provides most of the fentanyl. And when I say Mexico, we're talking about the cartels. And Mexico's an organized crime state. It has been for a while. They're going to do what they can, but the Mexican army is much more responsive to the cartels than it is to the president of Mexico. So, bombing these places isn't going to stop anything. It's not going to improve anything. It may turn out to rally all of Latin America against us.
I think that's a likely possibility, and I would add to what Macgregor said that no fentanyl, as the propaganda seems to try to indicate, comes from Venezuela whatsoever. Literally zero fentanyl does. And just a minuscule amount of cocaine. Cocaine comes from, Colombia and Ecuador, and fentanyl comes from Mexico, and it's just so absurd if you're going to use that propaganda. No, this propaganda trip that Americans are receiving now is really indistinguishable from the neocon propaganda campaign that gripped Americans in 2002 and 2003. It's the same neocon playbook. No matter how many times the Republican establishment right now says, oh no, we're not neocons, we pushed the neocons out of power. Well, not apparently, because you're just trying to unleash the same playbook. It's not strength that it shows when you topple these regimes and plunge America into debt, $38 trillion into debt right now. Largely because of the war on terror. It's, added about 10 trillion to the debt in totality, exacerbated inflation at a time where Americans are having trouble making ends meet because of these disastrous policies, in addition to all the corporate welfare and the welfare state in general. And you're just going to put regime change on the table again. I say no. I say enough is enough. No more George W. Bush foreign policy, or should I say George W. Trump foreign policy.
The evil Yankee who's intervening yet again inside Central and South America. We're blamed for almost everything that's wrong down there. All we're doing is saying, I guess you're right. Look what we're doing now. It's not going to change anything. But that means you've got to come home. This seems to be the thing that no one in Washington wants to do. Somebody said, Doug, what do you want to come home for? We have troops all over the place. What do you want to come back here for? I said, because what happens here is far more important and existential for us than anything beyond our borders.
Amen. No more empire building schemes. Bring all the troops home. Stop these stupid entangling alliances with Israel and Ukraine. Focus inward on America. And take the advice of the founders who said it would be disastrous if you latched onto these foreign entangling alliances. They'd be rolling in their graves right now because they've been proven to be true. They never pay off for Americans. None of them. Zero. Not even your pet favorite foreign alliance. Greatest ally in the Middle East hasn't paid off. Greatest democracy in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine, hasn't paid off.
The world has changed. Putting little packets of troops or ships here or there isn't going to stop things from happening overseas. They're going to happen whether we like it or not. And the good news is most of what happens beyond our borders doesn't matter to us. It's not a reflection on us. We need to focus here. And I said, if you exercise some restraint right now, you bring the forces back to the United States, defend the borders, defend the coastal waters, and then crack down on the peddlers. And I would add child trafficking to the drug trafficking.
Of course.
And I would impose the death penalty for anybody who engages in it. That means you're going to go to trial, and if you're found guilty, you're going to face the death penalty. Everybody says, oh, that's terrible. But it's okay to bomb Venezuela. Don't execute the drug peddler or the child trafficker, but let's bomb Venezuela.
Well, it just shows, regardless of what you think about the death penalty and these issues, which are issues in America, the warped sense of priorities that this ruling regime has is exactly that. It's warped. It's backward. It's not on the same wavelength as the rest of us. There's a ruling class. It's a big club, as George Carlson said, and we're not part of it because we don't have the same priorities as the regime. And the regime's priorities are empire building, are hegemony, are let's throw the best prophetic warnings of the founding fathers to the wayside and engage in becoming a new Roman Empire, spreading our influence throughout the world. And they say, oh, if you don't do this, well, then China or Russia will take advantage of it. Well, if you believe in liberty and you believe in the best merits of the arguments of the founders, and you're, pro-America, you want the best for what's, American and the best parts of what's in your state, it would be good if foreign countries that you saw as rivals would engage in entangling alliances that would destroy them, that would compound their debt, that would lead to inflation, that would lead to hostilities from throughout the world. That's the truth.
Doesn't make any damn sense whatsoever. That's where people's heads are right now in Washington, D.C.
But I worry. I mean, it used to be, well, you're the Army officer, you tell me, but my understanding was in a democracy, in our republic, the president has constitutional authority to just send troops and start wars effectively, even without congressional approval, I've noticed.
Yeah, only through precedent. That's a perversion of the Constitution and what Article 1, Section 8 says, and that's only that Congress can declare war. That's been bastardized for a long time. The War Powers Act kind of legalized that mantra. Presidents of all stripes have taken advantage of it, but Tucker's right in that that has become de facto law. No one seems to challenge that, especially most of Congress, except for a select few, like people like Thomas Massey. That won't take that, but that is true.
But there was always this expectation that someone would explain why we're doing this. You didn't want to go into a conflict because, of course, you never really know what's going to happen without getting the public on board.
But they don't do that. They haven't done that since the jump, Tucker. This is a little idealistic, if you ask me. I love his mentality toward foreign policy. I think he's on the right wavelength here, but they didn't do that in Iran. They didn't say, here's the merits of toppling the Shah in the 50s. Here's the merits of overthrowing Guatemala in 54. Here's the merits of overthrowing Pinochet in Chile and overthrowing the Yanukovych government in Ukraine in 2014. They never do it. They did drum up a support to do that in the form of a propaganda war in the face of Iraq, and that failed miserably because it was seen as such. It was a farce. So they don't always try to do this. They rarely do.
And I don't think I know 5 people who know this is about to happen.
Well, you know, you bring something up that's very interesting. Somebody pointed out to me just the other day, Benjamin Franklin told the population that was standing out in front of Independence Hall when they asked, what sort of government do we have now, Mr. Franklin? This is after the Constitutional Convention. He said, well, you have a republic if you can keep it. He said, we need to change that because today, if Ben Franklin came back, he would say, you have a drama queen republic if you can keep it.
Yeah.
We have a lot of frivolous theatrics in Washington that passes for diplomacy and policy. We have a president, and you know that I like the president personally, always have. But everything is about theatrics and optics and appearances. And now we have the Prime Minister of Japan, who just made wonderful deals for Japan with us, by the way. Japan is going to continue to buy oil and gas from Russia. There will be no change in that. Japan is going to invest more in the United States. We're already heavily invested here as it is. That's not a big deal. Although Toyota has since come back and said, we're not increasing our investment. Sorry, we didn't make that promise. But she gave Donald Trump the most expensive set of golf clubs in world history. They're beautiful. They're magnificent. And she promised that she would nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize. And suddenly, President Trump says, this has been a big success. We are winning.
Of course, most of Trump's presidency is based on theatrics, and I hate to say his best rhetoric about foreign policy in the past was theatrics, because look at this war regime we're facing where we bombed Yemen for a month, we started a new war with Israel in Iran to tank our own negotiations with Iran to create a new JCPOA. Well, just let's throw that by the wayside to get into a war. Now we're flirting with regime change in Venezuela, and Trump cares most about being promoted for the Nobel Peace Prize. It's just so absurd. And I'm with him. I don't even think Benjamin Franklin would look at this and say, you have a drama queen republic if you can keep it now. He'd say you have a world empire, and that's just factual. You threw away the best merits of what your heritage deserved from people that laid down their lives for liberty. They're now using you as tools to promote empire building. That's not what the founders wanted. That's not what they intended. Say what you want about the founders. They often disagreed on many things, but none of them were saying we need this worldwide empire. Not whatsoever. None of them did. Hamilton didn't. Jefferson didn't. Gouverneur Morris didn't. Fisher Ames didn't. Theodore Sedgwick didn't. George Mason didn't. None of them said that.
So now he goes on to South Korea. I'm sure he'll get some similar treatment there. And oh, by the way, I see no evidence that India is going to stop buying oil and gas from Russia either. And now we have this ceasefire that was declared a few weeks ago that's just completely disastrously violated by the Israelis. And everybody says, okay, that's fine. So what are we dealing with? We're dealing with facades, illusions. And I think Venezuela is another illusion. Instead of doing exactly what you've suggested, turning inward, focusing here at home on what's important, bring the forces back. If we'll exercise some restraint now, We'll build more capability for the future. But there is no long term planning. We launched a tariff war. There's no stability in the tariff regime. It's driving everyone crazy. They talk about the dollar as reserve currency. That's all shifting into pure gold now. Ask Nassim Taleb. Ask Ray Dalio. Ask anybody.
Not only that, but BRICS has an incentive to create a new currency that could be the world reserve currency, especially as the U.S. lays secondary tariffs on India, a country that would have been generally beholden to the United States that was BRICS. That would be an opportunity that Trump could have made to extract that country from BRICS. Like Nixon in some ways extracted China from the Soviet Union. They had a schism before that, but no less that being, a viable path. No, let's drive them closer together by targeting India and Modi, who was close to Trump in his first term. Let's stick it to the Indian regime. It's just so stupid.
Gold is the new reserve currency. We're not even prepared for that world. We're not paying attention to it. Let's bomb Venezuela. Let's bomb Colombia. Let's punish those bastards. They're the ones that created this drug problem. No, they're not. They're feeding an appetite in North America for something that people will pay a lot of money for. Crack down on the appetite at home, secure the borders, the coastal waters, and stay out of Central and South America.
I hold the minority opinion. I don't understand how. I mean, our public conversation is so dominated by Hamas, Hezbollah, all these faraway, Ukraine, Russia, these faraway conflicts, groups that are really not connected to the United States and haven't over time posed a meaningful threat to the United States. You're not even allowed to say that. Hamas does not pose a threat to the United States and never has. Like, why am I more mad about Hamas than I'm mad about the open air drug market in Philadelphia? Why don't any politicians in the Congress put the open air drug market in Philadelphia above the threat of Hamas? What is that?
Well, I think
good question, because it's all other considerations for any other program that politicians want to put forward, because it's so intricately tied into so many lobbies that have a Venn diagram of incentives that overlap. Like the banking lobby, they want this because they profit off debt of Americans. United States national debt, profit off it immensely. The military-industrial complex. The United States buys bombs to send into these military strikes, military operations, proxy wars versus Russia, bankrolling a genocide in Gaza, getting involved in a war in Iran, bombing campaigns in Yemen, blockade in Yemen, and now we're talking about Venezuela. Those two lobbies in particular benefit immensely from these sorts of policies. And I hate to say, the political class is won over by these entrenched lobbies that maintain power and authority and influence, regardless of whether you elect Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, or Donald Trump, or Obama, or Bush, or Reagan, or Carter, or whoever, Bill Clinton, whoever it is. They still maintain power because of their stranglehold on the United States. I don't think there's a good way to fix that unless you push back from the localities. To nullify the worst, most egregious, immoral, and unconstitutional mandates by the central government. And you might ask, how can you do that in terms of war? Well, there's a great legislative model called Defend the Guard, and the heroes like Dan McKnight at Defend the Guard are pushing this in the states, where it would refuse to allow the state militia forces, notably the National Guard, from being used in undeclared wars and regime change wars like this. These stupid operations that never pay a dividend to the American people. That, I think, is the solution. But, hey, I'm with Macgregor and I'm with Tucker. This is backward. Regime change in Venezuela would prove to be a disaster. It's indistinguishable from Bush and Cheney. Let's just be real about that. Those still supporting Trump. Or tell me how I'm wrong. Tell me how this isn't straight out of the neocon playbook, because I want to know. Right down below. Am I right? Let me know down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Tucker. Thank you for having this conversation. Also, please consider becoming a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button below. And if you do that, I'll appreciate your support and give you access to all my videos before they go live on YouTube. And also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below, plug in your email. I'll send it to you free of charge to your email. That tells the story of how America became a world empire from a once decentralized League of States. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.